Hey, everybody, Tom Sega here from Duluth Pack, and this is the Duluth Pack podcast, Leader of the Pack. And today's special guest is a true leader. She has had a digital company and a radio host and in the publishing world and editor-in-chief. And holy cow, she has a new endeavor as well. Allison Kaplan, welcome.
Well, hello. Good to see you.
It's, you know what, at my age, it's just good to be seen. I'll tell you. We've been friends for, the first time I think you interviewed me for something, well, probably good 10 years ago or so. And you've been very good to us and good to the company. We really appreciate that. And we're excited to have you. I'll tell you what, we're a big fan of you. And I do a lot of these podcasts, Allie, and as we were off camera here, I was like, man, I'm going to be a little bit nervous here because you're a big shot. Look at all these fancy titles we get to talk about here today. So here's what we want to do. We want to go back to the beginning. Just tell us a little bit about you. Where'd you grow up and what was your childhood like? And where did you go to high school? And where'd you go to college? And what'd you major in and all that good stuff?
Okay, I think it's going to be a short story. It's kind of boring, but I grew up in Minnesota. I grew up in the Twin Cities in Edina. My parents met in the retail world. They both worked at Dayton's. So I am truly a product of Dayton's, as they like to joke. When I was little, my dad was in trend merchandising and product development. My mom was in special events. So I kind of came by my whole childhood, I said I did not want to go into retail. And then I ended up writing about retail. I said I did not want to go into broadcasting like my mom. I ended up doing radio and a podcast. Anyway, so I grew up in the Twin Cities. I always loved to write. I always asked a lot of questions. Some may call me curious, others might just say nosy. But for whatever reason, I sort of figured out pretty early that channeling that into journalism was a way to ask my questions, write stories, and maybe get paid for it one day. And so I started doing that. I wrote a column in the community newspaper. I wrote for my high school newspaper, and then I majored in journalism in college. So I was very oddly focused at my young age.
And where did you go to college in J school?
I went to the University of Wisconsin-Madison. So proud Badger, went to journalism school there. It's a fantastic journalism school. I'm actually you're old when they ask you to come back and be on the board of advisors. So I'm now on the journalism board there, which is really cool. But yeah, it was a great experience. I interned for the Milwaukee Sentinel before it was the Sentinel Journal, before the Journal Sentinel, before they had joined forces. And I wrote for the Badger Herald newspaper. And yeah, it was a great experience.
Obviously a good writer all the way back from early on.
I don't know about good. I just wrote a lot.
I would have to say good because I've read many of your articles. So tell us about Alley Shops Digital. What's a thought behind that and how did you get that going and when?
Right. Well, that was something that happened. So after I graduated, I started working in newspapers. I worked in Chicago for a number of years. I worked for the Daily Herald newspaper, worked for a wire service for a little while. And then I came back to Minnesota to work for the St. Paul Pioneer Press. And I was on the features staff and I was writing about retail. I was writing about shopping and style and lifestyle. And I ended up writing a fair amount about stores and, the kinds of things that weren't so much about reading it right now. It was more relevant when you wanted to go shopping. If I wrote about Duluth Pack, you're looking for that story the day you're going up to Duluth and you want to go see the flagship store. And at the time, so very long ago, articles would go on the website for 1 week and then they would disappear. And so you couldn't find that content. And so I wanted to create a directory, a digital directory that would help you shop local. So you could shop by category or you could shop by neighborhood, and it would be there the day you were going shopping and wanted that information. And so I took it to my editor-in-chief at the time at Pioneer Press, a great journalist, Tom Flatting. And I said, hey, I want to do this thing. I think we're not making the best use of this content. And he said, that is a great idea, and we're not going to do it. And I said, oh, okay, well, I think that's kind of short-sighted. Everything about digital and about the way newspapers did websites, back then in the, early to mid 2000s was just very short-sighted. Anyway, he understood and he didn't want me to leave. And so he said, okay, you can do it. You can stay here and do it. And most of my colleagues were shocked because at the time, you didn't really get to have a side hustle in journalism. You were either all in, or if you left, you were never coming back. And so it was a little unprecedented. The deal that we made, and we did it in writing, was that, obviously I wasn't going to be selling because I was a journalist. And to me, I didn't want to sell. I saw it as the same kind of model as any other, media outlet, newspaper, which is, that's kind of church and state, keep it separate. And so that's what I did. And so I built Alley Shops into this directory of Twin Cities shopping. It had an email, a newsletter. It had a good base. And it was, again, this was early days. This was before Instagram. Twitter was just starting, and it worked.
And how did this get involved then with shopping and customers of Mall of America?
So that came a little bit later. You can't be a retail or business reporter in this town and not write about Mall of America, especially in the 2000s, 2010. And I was fascinated with the place. I missed the opening of the Mall of America. That was when I was away at college, and I just wasn't paying as much attention then. So when I moved back, it was thriving, it was happening. And I was just fascinated by, first of all, what a microcosm of the whole world it is, and the consumer world, everything there. And the fact that it brought to our kind of mid-sized market, stores and trends and people and celebrities that wouldn't have been coming here if it wasn't for the Mall of America. So I got really, interested, and I would get asked about it all the time. Literally, I'd have friends who would call me from the mall and be like, okay, I'm at Nordstrom. How the heck do I find that one French fry place? And I knew all the answers. My backup plan was always like, well, if the journalism thing doesn't work out, I could be a concierge at the mall. So I knew a lot about it. And I thought the same way that an independent retail guide works well for the Twin Cities, I thought somebody needed to do a guide for the mall. Again, early days, malls didn't have interactive directories then. They didn't have anything to help you when you were there and you wanted the information. And I also thought that they're not going to tell you that anything sucks. Pardon my French, because they need to support it. It's all their tenants. And I was able to say, I was in the unique position of having expertise, but being able to say, you know what, things are a little overpriced at this place, but if you go down the hall, you're going to find a really good sale rack. Or, I could just give the kind of the insider intel that people wanted. So I created, Alley Shops 2.0 was an independent guide to the Mall of America.
Did you then sell advertising to different stores at the time so that they would sponsor you so that you would then talk about them? Or was this just independent where you could go and pretty much have a freewheeling, I get to kind of say whatever I want?
Well, the selling part was sort of the weak link, I'll be honest with you, from a business. So in the early days of Alley Shops, as far as like the local stores, yeah, we did. We sold ads. I had people who helped on the side, and they would sell ads in the email, they would sell ads on the website. For when it became, Alley Shops Mall of America, we tried a couple things. We wanted to develop a mobile app, and we explored different ways of setting it up. I felt really strongly, journalist then, journalist now. I didn't want to taint the information. I didn't want to, I wanted to do it like, okay, could we sell enhanced listings? I wasn't going to not include someone because they didn't buy advertising any more than I wanted to pump someone up because they bought advertising. So we experimented with a couple of things. We sold some. It was never. It wasn't going to be a full-time thing. In it, we were playing around with it, and my bigger vision was: could we do this in other places? Could we replicate this and take it to other malls? But it was, I think about it now, frankly, and with all the coverage I do of startups and the venture world and all that, I probably would have approached it differently. And I think it was maybe a little early, but then that moment in time, kind of changed because the malls got savvier about what resources they offered. And frankly, people aren't going to malls in the numbers that they used to, let's be honest.
Well, it's certainly through the pandemic, we all know that, and it hurt them pretty.
It was a really good experience. I never lost money on it, and for a while, it was a nice little side hustle.
So, Allie, did you ever start that app then for the Mall of America? Did that ever get rolling?
Yeah, it existed. It did. So I built it, hired a mobile, web developer. It was a little, again, now that's so common. Then it was like, we debated, do we want to do a native app? Do we want to do mobile? Mobile was frankly cheaper to build. It was kind of a newer idea. Learned a ton. We did put it together, and it was used, and it served its purpose. Just didn't make me rich.
What you say you learned a ton, Allie? What other than you learned that it wasn't going to make you rich? What did you some of the biggest lessons you learned from trying to make an app and obviously a mobile app if people were going to be at the mall and you wanted them on the app at that time?
Right. Well, first of all, I think, for me, it was a real crash course in just in software development. I learned a lot about digital. I learned a lot about what the options were at that moment, which is, different, of course, than 3 years later, 5 years later. Things were changing so quickly. What you want to spend money on, what you don't need to spend money on. I have a bad habit personally of just taking on more and more. I'm like, oh, I can just do that. I can just do that. And you just kind of pile things on. Perhaps it would have been made more sense to spend a little more money, to be able to do more quickly and take on less myself. And I think, first of all, I think things have just changed a lot. I don't know if some of the opportunities that exist today, the kind of incubator programs and accelerators and the money that is available, either I didn't know about it then, or I don't think it was all as readily available. I would have probably approached it differently today, for sure.
And so in 2007, you host a radio show of Shop Girls.
Is that when I started it? You'd probably know better than I do. I'm not looking at my LinkedIn. Yeah, that's a while ago, huh?
That's Jeez. What I have. And it was on 107.1 My Talk, and you have Shop Girls. Tell us all about that.
So keep in mind, all these things overlapped. I mean, I have never not had a day job at a newspaper or magazine. I've always had that, from the day I started at the Daily Herald newspaper in Chicago. So I was still at the St. Paul Pioneer Press. And I was doing a lot of radio interviews. I would write a story that some radio person would think was interesting, and they'd say, hey, will you come on and talk about this? It was in the early days of My Talk 107, which, if you know that station, people are rabid fans of that station. And the whole premise of it, and it was really Ginny Morris from Hubbard Broadcasting, it was the idea of creating talk radio primarily for women, not only women, but, primarily for women. And it wasn't going to be about news, and it wasn't going to be about sports. And that didn't really exist. And that's what My Talk was going to be. And so from the early days, I would go on shows back in the days of Kevin Berger. I would, go on with her for an hour and just talk about different things going on. But so I started doing a lot of interviews obviously a lot related to retail. And their program director reached out and said, hey, do you want to do a show about shopping? And I was like, okay. And the truth is, it was at the moment that I was starting Alley Shops. And in my head, I thought, well, this is going to be a great way to promote it. I don't have an advertising budget. And so it just kind of all seemed to click, like this made sense. And I enjoyed doing radio. And so I started doing Shop Girls pretty much at the same time that I was launching Alley Shops, at the same time that I was having babies, and I still had the day job. Really dumb plan.
I was going to say, good thing you're low on energy. I mean, this low energy thing, you must have been pretty busy with that lack of energy.
I thought I would do radio. I thought that would be, a couple of years. I mean, lo and behold, here I am still doing it today. My co-host is my mother. And I think a lot of people in the early years, I had a different partner, Alexis Walsko, who's fantastic. She runs Lola Red PR. We had tons of fun, but she decided that she needed to focus on she runs her own PR agency. And she probably made the smarter decision and decided she didn't need a side hustle. It made more sense for me as a journalist. And it was just an extension of everything I would write. I write all week, and then I would get on the radio on Saturday mornings and I could talk about everything. And so it all worked together. My mom would fill in and people loved her. And so she became the regular host several years ago. And I think people are surprised, some people don't realize she had a background. I mean, it isn't like this just happened overnight. I mean, when I was a kid, my mom hosted fashion segments on a show called PM Magazine, which some long timers might remember. It was kind of a regional lifestyle show. She would, for Dayton's, would host, they would do like a top 10 fashion and top 10 songs in the 8th floor auditorium. And she hosted that. So she had a history also in fashion and retail. And, we've got good chemistry, mother and daughter. And so it just made sense. So we're still doing it today, and she won't let me quit. And that's the honest to God truth.
Tell us about the dynamic of working with a family member. I mean, your mother.
That's a whole other podcast, Tom. I don't know if we can go there. No, it's fantastic. I mean, it's an amazing, it's super fun. We get it on both ends. I get people emailing me telling me I need to be nicer to my mother, that I should not. And I'm like, oh my gosh, if we didn't have a good relationship, we couldn't joke around like we do. It comes from a place of total love and respect and, and admiration of each other, that we can have a little fun, Then on the other hand, we'll get people we'll do events and people will say, are you actually mother and daughter? And I'm like, do you think I'm making this up? Are you kidding me? so it's funny. But it is very unique, but my mom is like a bigger pop culture buff than I am. She does these tech reports, which are just riddled with misinformation, but people love them. And then people will actually ask her for advice. I'm like, are you kidding? It's a joke. But it's a lot of fun. And I think that there are a lot of mothers and daughters out there, especially, who just appreciate that dynamic. We all have stories about going shopping with our mom giving us the side eye, not thinking what we're wearing looks right. And so we kind of bring that, multi-generational perspective to it, and it works really well.
Or vice versa, you giving your mom the side eye saying, I can't believe you wore that.
I got to be real careful. A lot of haters. My mother is a lot more popular than I am, I'll tell you that.
So Allie, let's talk about social media with both Alley Shops and Shop Girls. Just give out people the handle so listeners who don't know about this can find you and hopefully not hate on you and your mom.
Thank you. I appreciate that. So I remain, even though I'm not really doing anything today with the Alley Shops brand, it's still, it's kind of just it was a moment in time. And I was starting Alley Shops at the time that I was starting Twitter and that I was getting on all these social platforms. And so I still use that as my handle because that's how people know me. So I am Alley Shops, ALISHOPS on Twitter, on Instagram, on LinkedIn. You can find me with my full name, Allison Kaplan. And, I'm just kind of different things, different places, but Alley Shops, I'm pretty easy to find.
Well, in all the places we think you're pretty cool. So now we keep coming forward. As you know, you got your day job, you got about 14 side hustles
Keep moving.
going. Yeah. And hey, I'm going to get in the publishing world.
Right.
What's the heck's with that?
Well, I always had a great relationship with editors from Minneapolis St. Paul magazine. And we talked, Jane Haugen Olson, especially, who is my boss today. And she is the president of our city's media group and the editor-in-chief of Minneapolis St. Paul magazine. At the time that I was the shopping and style reporter for the Pioneer Press and starting Alley Shops, she was the shopping and style reporter for Minneapolis St. Paul magazine. So we would bump into each other out in the world and see each other at events. And we talked as she was moving up, she was looking to replace herself. And, talked a couple times, but they kind of wanted me to retire my Alley Shops Twin Cities guide because they were doing a guide. And it was kind of their whole team against me. And I really reveled in that. I liked being the underdog. Pioneer Press was the underdog. I was always kind of part of the underdog. And I didn't want to kill it. I mean, it was working well enough. And it was, that I felt like more attention, more time, more money, it could actually grow into something bigger. And I didn't want to retire it. And so finally, third time was the charm. Third time I sat down and talked with them, they said, okay, bring Alley Shops with you. Let's combine your Alley Shops shopping guide with our directory, because they were sort of building theirs at the same time. And so that's what we did. And so I joined Minneapolis St. Paul magazine as their senior editor of shopping and style.
You ever get tired of shopping?
No. I mean, here's what I would say. And I mean, I don't know how far you want to fast forward, but I mean, I feel like retail is in my blood. Don't you kind of feel that way too? I mean, come on, you're in the product business.
Oh, I'm a horrible retailer. That's why we have wonderful managers for our retail operation.
Well, don't get me wrong. I have no desire to work in, I did that. I mean, I worked in retail. I worked at Dayton's, growing up in high school. I worked at Lindale Garden Center in college. I mean, I did all of that. I've always been fascinated. Here's the deal. Whether you like shopping or not, we all do it. We all buy stuff. And why we buy what we buy and how we do it, I find it really interesting and really telling about our culture, our society, our trends. And so I've always been interested in that and remain interested in that. I have now broadened my world with Twin Cities business, and I don't focus just on that, but I always come back to it. I mean, I'm a retail junkie and I still love those stories, and I still have great contacts and keep up on all of it.
Allie, as the senior editor of shopping and style at Minneapolis St. Paul magazine, what are your responsibilities?
So, being a magazine editor it's more varied than people might realize. I mean, I was deciding what we should write about in the magazine as well as online, but there's also a major events component to it. We developed Fashionopolis, which continues today and is the premier fall fashion show put on by Minneapolis St. Paul, and became a great vehicle to showcase local retailers, local designers, and really kind of support the community. And so I did a ton of events. I would do photo shoots. It sounds very glamorous. There's a lot of schlepping involved. I don't miss that. When people ask me, I mean, being part of a fashion show and doing all that, I mean, yeah, it's exciting. It's fun. Your adrenaline gets going, but like pulling the clothes and having to itemize everything and writing down every detail to then put in print, I don't miss that. I did that.
So I was going to say, you don't have people that just do it all for you, right?
Not as many people as I should have had. I still feel that way today. I don't know what I'm doing wrong.
So 2010 is when you got that role?
I think so. That sounds right. Yeah,
Okay.
I joined Minneapolis St. Paul magazine in 2010. Yep.
Okay. And then you transitioned to senior deputy editor.
Yeah. somewhere along
What
there.
hell?
Uh,
2018. It was by the way, it was 2018.
is that
We
right?
did some
Oh
homework here.
my
Yeah, we did
God.
some homework
Yeah,
here.
well, yeah. I mean, that was just sort of like moving up the ranks a little bit at Minneapolis St. Paul when I was, the longer I was at Minneapolis St. Paul magazine, beyond covering shopping and style, I just took on a broader role, helping as we were developing the website. I love digital. I love digital. I find it really satisfying. I like that you can post a story and know right away if it's hitting or not. I like the immediacy of it. I think that comes from my newspaper days of, wanting to break news, and it's harder to break news in a magazine. And so digital allows you to do that. So I just took on a bit of an expanded role with Minneapolis St. Paul, but then soon after moved over to our sister publication, Twin Cities Business. So same company for me. Internally, it was just a move down the hall, but externally, people were like, what? The fashion and shopping girl is going to run a business magazine?
And that's the next question I had right there
Yeah.
is now editor-in-chief
Right.
of Twin Cities. These roles, I'll tell you what, these are some pretty darn fancy titles we got
just
going
add
here.
chief to anything and it just really, really works, right?
You're out of the retail realm.
Mm-hmm.
And now you're into the business realm. And what, first of all, what does that look like? And second of all, it is obviously different than what you had been doing. And what were some of those challenges?
So I think from a content perspective, it wasn't really a challenge at all, because I'm a journalist. I'm a reporter. I can write about anything. I might be, best known for writing about retail, but if you know how to write, if you know how to ask questions and you know how to write, it's the same principles, whether you're writing a story about, a Fortune 500 company or a small designer. And I think my approach to writing about shopping and fashion, I always came at it from the standpoint of business. I really did. Even when I was writing for a lifestyle publication, I just always thought it was interesting, the inner workings. How did they make this work? Can you make money? Where do these trends come from? I always found those elements of it really interesting. And so that translated really well to TCB. I had been freelancing for them. Anytime they would have something that was kind of in the realm of shopping, retail trend, they would often ask me, and I would pitch stories to them. So I had a relationship, we're the same company. The editor-in-chief of that publication left, and my boss, Jane Haugen Olson, called me into her office one day and just said, crazy idea. Would you ever consider, and honestly, I had never thought about moving over to Twin Cities Business. I had never thought about being an editor-in-chief. I was not one of those journalists who was like looking to keep moving up. I mean, all the way back to my high school days, you were supposed to go from writer to editor. And I was like, can't I just be a columnist over here? I like to tell stories. I wasn't looking to get into management. A lot of times when you move up the ranks, you move further away from the thing you love to do that got you into it in the first place. So that was never really my goal. But I don't know. I mean, when she said it, at first I was totally floored that I would even be considered. But within a matter of, I think by the time I left her office, the wheels were already turning. And I was like, maybe that is the thing. I think for a long time, I kept thinking, because I was always a person who had these side hustles going on, that I needed to make a side hustle my main thing. And I needed to take the leap, and I needed to finally leave the day job and go do, a project of my own. And suddenly I realized, what, maybe I don't need to leave. Maybe I need to shake things up here and see what else I can do within this company, which I know and love and see all this potential. And so that's what I did. So I joined a team that was really intimidating, really well established, some amazing journalists, Adam Platt, who is the executive editor. I mean, he's been with Minneapolis St. Paul and Twin Cities Business for many years. Liz Fetter, who came from the Star Tribune. And I mean, these are people who have, decades of experience covering business, who, Liz covered Northwest Airlines, and she knows nonprofits. And these are people who really know their stuff. And so, it was, that was intimidating, but it was time for me to take on a new challenge. And it was definitely the right move.
What would you say, Allie, is your favorite business that you've been able to, I wouldn't say write about, but talk to and learn about in the business realm versus the retail realm?
You know, I mean, look, a Target might be too obvious, but I mean, that company is so, fascinating. And I feel what the space that I always loved, and I have since my newspaper days, I have always felt like there was this disconnect. There were people who loved fashion and who could obsess all day about chiffon and silk. And then there were people who loved business who I felt like never went shopping. And it's hard to write about retail when you have no clue and you haven't been in a store. And I feel like I've been able to bridge that divide. I understand the business side, and I like the fashion, surprise and wow the guest, and the consumer side. And so I try in everything I do, and it's true at Twin Cities Business as well, to bring that together. But on the TCB side, I've been able to walk the store with Brian Cornell, the CEO. I don't know that I would have had that opportunity if I was, a fashion writer. And so it's really cool to see how it all comes together and to cover it and talk about it from that angle, especially a company that's as influential as it is in our town.
What is it like to walk a store with the CEO
Right?
of a giant like Target? What's that like, and what's the experience?
He moves fast. He is, I mean, super fun, super cool. I mean, of course, it comes with an entourage. So people are looking. I mean, I think, first of all, when you're at the downtown Minneapolis, the Nicollet Mall store with Brian Cornell, they all know who he is. I don't know if that's true out in the suburbs. It would be fun to try that and see. I think they probably would, but they're all, they love him, and he's, and he takes the time to stop. And, of course, I'm a reporter. What is he going to do? Be rude to anybody? But, he takes the time to stop, and what's, how are things going, and what's selling? And you can see that he's really seeing it. Like, he'll stop to straighten something out on a shelf. I love that. Those kind of details are just, and he genuinely loves it. I think that was my biggest takeaway, that you might think, oh, he's just up in the, in the penthouse running numbers and making these decisions that don't take people or product or experience into mind. Not at all. I mean, I think he is very, very much in touch with what goes on the sales floor.
Ellie, how did COVID impact your business to connect with other businesses? Obviously, you and I are doing this over Zoom today. And so many people, this became a little bit of our new way to communicate because we were all locked down. But you're ingrained in business now, and with interviewing business people. How did that change, and how did that impact your day-to-day and your business as a whole?
Pros and cons to everything. I would say, I mean, look at this, like you and I mean, this is like so natural now, and isn't it so nice? And I think there are people who I never would have had the face-to-face with before that now you do. And it actually feels more intimate in a way. Now, that said, we don't all want to, be on screens all day. For us, when something big is going on, we can't go home and sit down and watch Netflix. We never wrote more than in the early months of the pandemic. I mean, if you look at our web traffic, numbers doubled, and like overnight, because there's this urgency. People want to know what's going on. What are companies doing? Even though we aren't a breaking news outlet, we write about news, and we write about things that concern people in our community. And so it was gratifying to be able to do that. It was also nonstop. So while all my friends were like, I finished Netflix, now what do? I'm learning how to basket weave. I was working harder than I ever had in my life without ever leaving my house. Thankfully, what we do, translates to being remote pretty well. And because of technology, I mean, we made entire magazine, we always did pinups on the wall still, even in the year 2020. So we lost that, but we were able to recreate that online, and we can get an entire magazine made, through our computers and without ever printing out a page. Is it ideal? No, but it's very doable. And so we did. And so we just, buckled down and did the work. I think, one of the biggest changes, Twin Cities Business does a lot of events, a lot. And that's a big part of who we are. We're a connector. We can bring the Brian Cornells to the stage, and we can, provide a way for mid-sized companies and smaller and everybody to come together and to meet each other and to hear those insights. And that's what we like to do. That's another form of content that we create. So that was a big challenge, and a big financial loss. I mean, if you're on the business side, obviously, because sponsorships and advertising. So we took a huge hit, like so many other, a lot of advertising in, hospitality, restaurants. There were industries where it just, it went away overnight. And then it started to come back, and certain industries have been slower to come back than others, but some were doing really well and had new needs. And we pretty quickly figured out how to put on a pretty good virtual event. It doesn't replace an in-person event, and we're back to in-person now, but we did some really great stuff virtually and brought together hundreds of people, gathering over the lunch hour to have a important conversation, whether it's about diversity and inclusion or how we work now, how do we move forward, and, things like that. So we've made it work. A couple other changes that we made along the way. Twin Cities Business went to every other month. We combined issues. It was a function of economics. It's a trend in the industry, both among regional magazines and nationals. I think you'll notice that, some of your favorite titles are now 8 times a year, or they're combining issues over the summer. It's frankly, it saves a lot of money in terms of paper costs. We can't get paper right now. There are supply chain issues. I mean, our April-May issue is going to be, a few days late getting to subscribers because of paper. And it's no surprise. We publish every but it's still, I mean, we're grappling with the same things that we're writing about that other companies are dealing with. So we're now doing these combined issues. They're fatter than ever. We're writing as much as we ever did. It's just kind of a different cadence. And we also launched a new title, because why not launch a new magazine in print in the middle of a pandemic, right?
Well, you know what? You might as well, right?
So that's
when it rains, it might as well pour.
Exactly. So continuing my trend of just taking on more, we saw an opportunity and we went for it.
Allie, the events, I'm intrigued by that, because we're a business that does a lot of trade shows, and that world has changed dramatically. You're in events. Were your first events that you started at the tail end of COVID here, that you started doing again, were people pretty apprehensive of coming to those? Or were people like, holy cow, I can finally get out and go and shake somebody's hand again? And if we had to wear a mask, at least I could see their eyes in the live.
Yeah. Shockingly, people were really eager, and it's still that way. I think our first event back in person was our Hall of Fame, our annual Minnesota Business Hall of Fame awards. And, it was a masked event, and, we instituted protocols and distancing, and we limited the numbers and did all of that. But people were really eager to be there and really excited to be there. And that's what we continue to find. I mean, we did our Person of the Year event, which we do in December, which is one of our bigger events. It's where we honor our TCB 100. It's 100 people that you need to know in the year ahead in business. And we invite them all. And I mean, standing in that room, it was like just before Omicron. We got very lucky. And again, we required masks and all of that. But it was really something. It was like, wow, people really want to get together more than ever.
And so in the middle of all of this, since you weren't busy enough with all the things we talked about, you took on a new role as vice president of content.
Oh, yeah. I forgot about that. Yes.
Oh, yeah. I forgot about this other gig I have going here.
I mean, whatever. It's just a title. I mean, I think it's so funny, because in some industries, those VPs and, those titles matter so much. In my world, I mean, I don't ever introduce myself that way. I don't really use it. I think editor-in-chief feels more salient to what I'm doing. And it's frankly more how I identify myself. But it's a reflection of being part of the leadership team at MSP Communications. We're a local company. We have two divisions. The company has changed and evolved. We have Cities Media Group, which is Twin Cities Business and Minneapolis St. Paul Magazine. And then we have MSPC, which is our agency side. And on the agency side, we have a whole team. We publish, we create content for all kinds of big businesses. If you remember the heyday of Delta Sky Magazine, that was us. We do the Twins magazine. We do, all kinds of things, a combination of digital and print. And so that's the agency. Anyway, on the content side, I think it's a reflection of me taking on, a bigger leadership role, with the team, both for Minneapolis St. Paul and for Twin Cities Business, thinking about what we're doing digitally, how we're mentoring, how we're evolving the staff, how we're covering things.
How do you manage your time with all of these roles? I mean, you take on so much. It's all kind of like Allie doesn't know how to say no. And we could write a book, I think, that says that Allie doesn't know how to say no.
Is this the
how
point?
Do you manage your time?
Yeah, is this the point where I lay down on the couch and I start, I can't say no. Yeah, there's a little bit of that. I would say, I'm pretty organized and efficient. I'm definitely a multitasker. I obviously like to be busy, and I thrive on that. And there are a lot of things I want to do, and I feel like, okay, I can just do it. And I usually do. But I would say that is probably the biggest challenge that I feel right now is, and I think so many people can relate. Feeling like I'm still in the weeds on the making of the magazine. I write, I'm still doing interviews, some days I'm helping with our social media. I'm doing all the things. And partly because of need, because we don't have a big team, and partly because of desire. I don't want to stop writing. I still love that. I still think of myself as a reporter. But it does make it hard to find the headspace to do kind of the bigger thinking, the strategy work, and the day-to-day. I'm literally struggling with that this week because we're trying to finish up our April-May issue, and I got to help. I got to help the team. There are things that have to be edited. I want to make sure that, we're doing the photo shoots well and that everything looks great. I care very much about what goes on every single page. I look at every single page, but at the same time, we're doing a redesign of the magazine, which is a huge undertaking. And I wish that I could spend all my time on that. Don't we all have things like that, you wish you could just have the headspace and the time? It's never going to happen. It's never going to happen. So you just have to make it happen. I have lists upon lists. I have Post-its on my computer. I try to be organized about, what are the things that have to happen today? What are the things that I'd like to happen today? A lot of lists get carried on. And I do try to carve out time. Like, I'm going to have to just say, tomorrow is about the redesign. And that's what I have to do. And the other things are going to have to wait because I need to spend some time on that, or, whatever it is.
And the nice people we scheduled this podcast this week. Well, you had all of these other things to do.
It's all good. It's all good. This is fun.
What advice do you have for people who are really busy like you in time management? You kind of figured this thing out, and there's a lot of people who have a lot of stress on themselves that they put on themselves because everyone's busy. Every company's trying to do more with less, and everyone gets additional roles. What could you give as advice, being someone who's done so many roles and juggled all those? What's the best advice you could give to somebody on how do you manage all of this?
Yeah, that's a good question. I feel like I could use that advice too. I think staying organized is helpful. I think this might sound kind of cliche, but I think it's really important to always make sure that you're taking time for yourself. For me, for a long time, I really enjoy working out. I feel better when I work out. And that was always the first thing to go. If I had a busy day, just, forget it. I won't go to the gym today. That changed during the pandemic, partly because I was home and I wasn't, the time that was spent in transit suddenly became, time, I can go for a walk or I can work out. But even on a really busy day, I try not to sacrifice that because I know that overall I'm going to be more productive even if I have less time, and I'm going to feel better in the process. So I think it's really important to make sure that you are, whether it's scheduling time for yourself or just taking the time for yourself, don't think of that as, a throwaway. And I think, lists help. Carving out time for different things. If you're trying to do multiple things, instead of doing 20 things at once, literally at once, that's when you get kind of overwhelmed and freaked out and you can't do anything. So just saying, all right, I'm doing this task now. I'm going to focus on this thing, and then I'll do those 4 other things. They'll still be there when you're done.
That's a pretty darn good advice, because I think people get overwhelmed and you get projects thrown on you and it's like, I still have all my day-to-day due, but you've kind of figured out how to juggle a lot of things all at the same time, yet get everything done.
Some days better than others.
Well,
I try.
I think you're being rather humble here, Allie. Tell us about this latest adventure. If I'm exhausted here. I'm exhausted, and I haven't done anything yet, but I'm exhausted. Talk to us about this latest endeavor, which started last fall, called Start Minnesota.
StartMN, yes. So this is our new magazine from Twin Cities Business. We're doing it twice a year, so spring and fall. And this really actually grew out. We didn't talk about the podcast either. So it kind of grew out of the podcast. One of the things I did early in my tenure with Twin Cities Business was launch a podcast called By All Means. And it's a show about leadership and innovation and entrepreneurship. And we tell stories of Minnesota brands, well-known brands. We really need to get you on the show. That's the next thing we're going to schedule. And people who are, kind of making business work in Minnesota. Because I love broadcasting and I'm a podcast junkie, and I think business stories lend themselves so well to it. That was important to me. And the podcast has been really popular and successful, and just made me realize that, there's so much going on. There are so many amazing entrepreneurs in our community. There's so much happening in the startup world, and we were covering it more and more in the magazine, but it just felt like we need something new. Like there's space for a new content platform that is truly focused on the startup world and entrepreneurship and innovation. And that goes for big companies too, because they're all trying to create incubators and do startups as well. So we launched StartMN in the fall. It's a new print magazine. Some people think that's really weird to cover, startups and innovation in print, but I just think there's no replacement for seeing something on the pages, for taking that moment to sit down. It elevates the content. It makes people realize, like, this is important. I got to see who's in this thing. So it's online. We have, you can go to tcbmag.com/startmn, and we have content there all the time. It was really just kind of a new way of categorizing it. And we're doing the print magazine twice a year. And it's been great. I think it's really additive. It goes out to Twin Cities Business subscribers. It's not a separate subscription. It's not on the newsstand. So you got to subscribe to Twin Cities Business if you want to get StartMN. But I think reading it makes you feel really just excited and hopeful and amazed by all of the talent that's right here in Minnesota.
There is an incredible amount. We've learned it through this podcast, which is Leader of the Pack, which it's not just business people, but it's leaders in whatever realm they're in. Could be about their life. It could be somebody like you. We've had a fun one on that, a cardiothoracic surgeon, because he made it sound like what he does for a living isn't that big of a deal. It's like, hey, over here we make canvas and leather bags. We don't save lives over here. And when you hear somebody say that, don't heart transplants? No, that's easy. It's like, oh, okay.
Isn't it good that there are people like that? Makes me feel better.
It certainly is. But let's go back, because we're on a podcast and we're incredibly proud about our podcast. How did the inception of your podcast, and how did you get that started, and what were your challenges with that, and how fun is it?
Well, you tell me. It's really fun. It's fun. To me, it's a different way of storytelling, and it's a level of authenticity that you just can't get in another platform. Now, there are certain stories that, I want to write them and I want to, lend the detail and the voice. But I think one of the reasons why podcasts really resonate with people, especially when you're talking about news or entrepreneurship or going deep, is you get that person's story unfiltered, told by them. And it's just different. I mean, a lot of times there are people who are also writing about in print too, but there's just something really intimate about telling the story through a conversation. So I love it. I listen to a lot, and it's been really gratifying. It's been gratifying the way people respond to it, and it's fun. I mean, I think you probably know this too, but it's just, I mean, one of my favorite things about being a journalist is that I can call people I don't know and say, do you want to come on my show? Do you want to talk? And they say yes. They generally say yes.
It is. I know. Isn't that crazy? And then they're like, what do you want to talk about? And then we go, you. And it's like, oh, people would be interested in me. And it's true. People are interested in the story. People are interested in your whole story here.
Well, I don't know.
Incredible.
We'll find out. If your numbers plunge, I'm very sorry.
I promise you they won't. And that's why we made this audio only and not video, because I'm on it, and we knew that things would plunge very quickly if they had to look at me. So that's why we make this audio only.
I will say though, I think it definitely puts guests at ease. I find that too, because sometimes I'll get asked like, oh my gosh, is this on camera? And I think once they know it's not, they just feel so much more relaxed. I'm like, come in your pajamas. I don't care.
We've done the same thing. It's kind of funny that, we're talking about a podcast, because we've had people that they're like, do you care if I put my feet up on my desk here? Because it's just audio, right? Like that. Or people are afraid that they don't realize that these aren't live. This is edited. And so that if somebody has a brain fart, well, guess what? You know what? That's probably not going to make the cut.
Zap it out.
Unless we have a bloopers or something like that.
That's a whole other thing. Yeah. So one of the things we did with By All Means because look, there's a lot of content out there, as you know, and there are a lot of podcasts about business, about entrepreneurship. I'm a huge fan of how I built this. I didn't want to try to replicate what they were doing. I mean, obviously we're taking a localized approach like we do in print. But one of the things we added that I really am proud of is a segment at the end of the show called Back to the Classroom. And we are our presenting sponsors, the University of St. Thomas, the Opus College of Business, and the Schultz School of Entrepreneurship. And so after our interview with our business leader or entrepreneur, we bring on a professor who's listened to the interview and who then puts it in some context. What's a takeaway for the rest of us? Because I think there is this funny reaction to all of the entrepreneurship going on that you kind of feel like a loser. You listen to the stories of Sarah Blakely making $1 billion with Spanx, and you listen to all these stories, and you're like, oh my God, they make it seem so easy. Why aren't I a billionaire? What am I doing wrong? And so I wanted to bring it home and help people understand, well, it's harder than it sounds. Or if you did these 3 things, it might help your business. And so we try to give some practical takeaways along with the inspiring story.
Well, I can tell you, just reading all of the stuff as we got this bio going here for the podcast, and we've known each other for a while. Yeah. You've interviewed me and whatnot. Talk about feeling like a loser. I feel like a complete loser here. I mean, you look at this. It's Allie Shops. It's the radio host of Shop Girls with your mom. How cool is that? Senior editor of shopping and style for Minneapolis St. Paul magazine, editor-in-chief for Twin Cities Business, editor-in-chief and vice president of content at Minneapolis St. Paul Communications, StartMN, and By All Means podcast. Well, holy cow, that's a mouthful there. I'm out of breath. Allie, this has been a lot of fun, but before we're done here today, now we're going to go a little bit personal on you.
Okay.
And so that's a mouthful. Congratulations. You've accomplished so much.
Thank you.
We're going to go to the packed question segment here. A little, get the pack thing.
I got it.
What is your biggest fear?
Oh my gosh. Biggest fear. I mean, I guess keeping with the business theme, just feeling like I didn't I haven't tried everything I want to do. Like I want to take more risks. I want to do other things. And my fear is, getting tired, getting complacent, getting too comfortable where I am and not taking bigger risks.
Holy moly. It doesn't seem like a fear when you read off that bio there, Allie. What is your favorite vacation destination?
Wow. I mean, it changes. But I'm a big fan of Costa Rica. I've been a couple times. I just love it there. You truly feel like you're escaping to another country. It's beautiful. I mean, you are escaping to another country, but I mean, it's so easy to get there. It's so accessible, and yet it's truly like a different world, and it's gorgeous and it's relaxing, and there's volcanoes and there's beach and there's everything. I really like it there.
Oh,
highly recommend.
I want to go now.
Yeah.
Although it is nice outside, it is spring when this is being taped. It is spring, and you're in the Twin Cities. You're a little warmer than us, but at least it's not 20 below outside.
Thank goodness. I'm done with that.
Oh, I'll tell you. Last packed question. What is the best piece of life advice that Allie has ever received?
Be kind. You can get a lot further by being nice than by being mean or overly aggressive. It sounds so basic, but it really is true. Just be kind and you get where you need to go.
And you know what? I got to tell you, that's a great ending, because you've always been very kind to us. And so we've always appreciated that. Folks, our special guest today is Allison Kaplan. Allie, thanks so much for being here. Can you please give the listeners again all of the handles? Because I mean, after hearing this, people are going to go, I got to follow this gal. She's amazing.
I'm just going to be flooded with new follows. Thank you, Tom. I appreciate that. So my personal is Allie Shops, at Allie Shops on Twitter, on Instagram, LinkedIn. You can just find me under my name, under Allison Kaplan, and TCB Mag. Follow us there. TCB Mag, MAG, on Twitter, on Instagram, on Facebook, on LinkedIn. We also have a new handle, TCB StartMN. For if you just want to focus on entrepreneurs and startups. We're there too on Instagram.
That is so awesome. You have given some great advice. Hearing your story and your journey is exhausting. Holy cow, you have accomplished so much. Allie, thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate it. This has been a blast. I cannot believe an hour's up.
So much fun. I'm going to take a nap.
I absolutely am going to. I probably won't even make it home after just reading your bio. That's a mouthful.
I know that we're not about, and I know that it's not about Duluth Pack, but I just have to tell you, Tom, I think you actually might know this, that one of my favorite bags in the world, and I've had it for years and years and years, and I'll never let it go, is my bright orange canvas Duluth Pack laptop bag. Love that bag.
You've actually sent us pictures about it. And there you go.
I love it.
You're using your own advice. You're being very kind.
Well, there you go.
Everyone, this has been Allison Kaplan. Please follow her on her handles. And as always, until next time, unplug from the indoors and recharge in the outdoors.